The crowd's roar shook the sand beneath Marcus's feet as he stood over his opponent, blood dripping from his gladius. 100 victories, 100 men dead, and still the emptiness inside him grew deeper than any wound. The Colosseum thundered with 50,000 voices chanting his name, Cal Vis, Cal Vis, Cal Vis. But Marcus Aurelius Calvus heard only the whispers of ghosts, the dying breaths of every man he'd killed to survive another day. He raised his sword to acknowledge the crowd, his scarred face expressionless beneath the afternoon sun. The defeated gladiator at his feet, barely more than a boy, really, groaned and tried to lift himself on trembling arms. Marcus had seen that look 1,000 times, the desperate hope for mercy, the thumb that might point up instead of down. The Emperor Hadrian himself presided over these games, celebrating the anniversary of his ascension. From his gilded box, he rose slowly, theatrically, letting the anticipation build. The crowd fell silent, waiting for the divine judgment of life or death. Marcus didn't look at the emperor. Instead, he stared at the boy, no more than 17 summers, with sandy hair that reminded him of. He couldn't think of that. Not here, not now. The thumb went down. The crowd erupted in approval. They always loved blood. Marcus knelt beside the boy, placing a calloused hand on his shoulder. "Look at the sky," he whispered, in a voice roughened by years of shouting battle cries. "Think of home." The boy's eyes, green like spring grass, found his. I have no home." "Then think of peace." One swift thrust, between the ribs, angled perfectly to pierce the heart. Marcus had become an artist of mercy in this arena of cruelty. The boy died instantly, his face relaxing into something almost like sleep. As Marcus stood, the master of ceremonies approached with a silk cushion bearing a wooden sword. The rudis, symbol of freedom granted only to the most exceptional gladiators. "Citizens of Rome," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Behold Marcus Aurelius Calvus, called the Lonely Gladiator, who has achieved his 100th victory. By decree of the divine Hadrian, he is granted his freedom and a purse of 100 gold aureus." Freedom. The word tasted like ashes in his mouth. The crowd cheered, but Marcus barely heard them. He accepted the wooden sword with hands that had forgotten how to do anything but kill. As he walked toward the gate of life, the exit reserved for victors, he passed the gate of death, where slaves were already dragging out the boy's body. In the gladiators' quarters beneath the arena, Marcus found his few possessions already packed in a worn leather satchel. Word traveled fast in the ludus. His fellow gladiators watched him with a mixture of envy and pity. Some called out congratulations, others simply nodded. They all knew what freedom meant for a man like Marcus, a man who had been a gladiator for 15 years, who had no family waiting for him, no trade but death. "Where will you go?" asked Titus, a Thracian fighter, who had shared his cell for the past 3 years. Marcus pulled on a simple tunic, feeling strange without the weight of armor. "Away. That's not a destination, brother. It's the only one I need." He left through the servants' entrance, avoiding the crowds of admirers who would be waiting at the main gates. The afternoon sun painted Rome's streets in shades of gold and shadow. Free citizens hurried about their business, barely glancing at another worn veteran walking among them. Without his armor, without the arena's sand beneath his feet, Marcus was just another ghost in a city full of them. He made his way to the Subura, the chaotic heart of Rome's lower districts, where anything could be bought or sold. The leather purse heavy with gold coins bumped against his hip with each step. Blood money, every aureus paid for with a life take. In a dim tavern that smelled of sour wine and old sweat, Marcus found what he was looking for, a trade merchant named Gaius Lucullus, known for dealing in unusual properties. "Ah, the famous lonely gladiator," Lucullus exclaimed, his fat fingers glittering with rings. "I heard about your manumission. Come to invest your winnings. I have shares in a garum factory that land." Marcus interrupted. somewhere remote, somewhere, he struggled for the word, empty. Lucullus's eyes gleamed with the particular greed of a man who sensed a desperate customer. Empty land. How fortunate, I happen to have acquired the deed to an entire town, Tergesti, in the hills beyond Tusculum, completely abandoned. A town, Marcus frowned. I want solitude, not responsibility. Oh, you'll have solitude, I assure you. Lucullus produced a yellowed scroll from beneath his counter. Tergesti has been empty for 20 years. The plague took most, and the rest fled. The Senate declared it cursed. No tax collectors will even go near it. Perfect for a man seeking isolation. Marcus studied the deed. The location was ideal. Far from any major roads, nestled in hills that would discourage casual visitors. Why hasn't anyone else claimed it? Superstition, mostly. Tales of ghosts, strange lights at night. Merchants avoid it, say their horses refuse to enter. Lucullus leaned forward conspiratorially. Between us, I think it's all nonsense, but it keeps the price low. How low? For you, champion. Let's say 90 aureus. It was robbery, but Marcus didn't care. He had no use for gold where he was going. Done. As they completed the transaction, Lucullus seemed to wrestle with his merchant's instinct for honesty. I should warn you, the last man who went to survey the property came back babbling about shadows that moved and voices in the wind, refused to speak of it further. Good, Marcus said, tucking the deed inside his tunic. I've had enough of the living. He left Rome that very evening, purchasing basic supplies and a sturdy mule from the market. As the eternal city faded behind him, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. The road stretched ahead, leading to a place where no one would know his name, where no crowds would bay for blood, where he could finally stop being the lonely gladiator and simply be alone. The journey took 3 days. The roads deteriorated as he climbed into the hills, from paved Roman engineering to dirt tracks, to barely visible paths overgrown with wild rosemary and thyme. His mule picked its way carefully through the rocky terrain, occasionally snorting nervously as if sensing something Marcus couldn't. On the morning of the 4th day, he crested a ridge and saw it, Tergesti. The ghost town spread below him like the skeleton of some ancient beast. Stone buildings stood roofless and hollow, their windows staring blindly at the sky. The forum's pillars had toppled like fallen soldiers, and weeds grew thick between the paving stones. A small aqueduct had crumbled in sections, creating a broken smile across the landscape. But it was beautiful in its desolation. Mountains rose protectively on 3 sides, and a clear stream still gurgled through what had once been the town's heart. Olive trees, grown wild and unpruned, dotted the hillsides. The air smelled of herbs and history. Perfect, Marcus whispered. As he descended the path, his mule suddenly stopped, ears flat against its head. It refused to go further, no matter how he coaxed. Finally, Marcus dismounted and took his pack. Fine, I'll walk from here. The moment his feet touched the old road leading into Tergesti, a chill ran down his spine, not of fear but of recognition. This place knew abandonment. It understood loneliness. It was exactly what he needed. The town was larger than he'd expected. Perhaps 200 families had once lived here, judging by the ruins. He walked slowly down what must have been the main street, his footsteps echoing off empty walls. Some buildings had collapsed entirely, while others stood remarkably intact, as if their inhabitants had simply vanished one day. Marcus chose a house near the Forum, solid stone construction, with most of its roof intact. The door had long since rotted away, and inside he found pottery shards, a broken table, and inexplicably, a child's wooden toy horse lying in a corner. He picked it up, running his thumb over its carved mane, then set it carefully on a window ledge. As the sun began to set, painting the ruins in shades of blood and gold, Marcus made camp in his new home. He had brought enough supplies for a week while he figured out how to make this place livable. There was work to be done, clearing debris, perhaps getting one of the wells functional again, securing shelter against the coming winter. But as darkness fell and he sat by his small fire, something made him freeze. A sound, or rather the absence of sound. No insects chirped, no nightbirds called. The silence was complete, oppressive, unnatural. Then he heard it. The unmistakable creak of a door swinging on ancient hinges. Marcus's hand went instinctively to his gladius. Old habits died hard, even in freedom. He peered out through a gap in the wall, scanning the moonlit ruins. Nothing moved, but the door sound came again, from somewhere deeper in the town. Wind, he told himself. Though the air was perfectly still, he tried to sleep, but the silence pressed against his ears like water. Once, he could have sworn he heard footsteps on the old stones, but when he looked out, the street was empty, except for shadows. Near dawn, exhaustion finally claimed him. He dreamed of the arena, of the boy with green eyes, of a woman's voice calling a name he couldn't quite remember. Marcus woke to find the child's toy horse had been moved. It now sat on the ground beside his bedroll, positioned as if someone had been playing with it. He was on his feet instantly, gladius drawn, every muscle tense. But the house was empty, the doorway showing only the morning mist rolling through the ruins. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice cracking from disuse. The echo of his words came back changed, distorted, almost like whispers. "Who's there? Who's there?" "We're here." Marcus Aurelius Calvus, who had faced death 100 times without flinching, felt the first tendril of fear snake through his chest. He had come to Tergesti seeking solitude, but he was beginning to suspect he wasn't alone. The morning mist clung to Tergesti like a burial shroud, turning the abandoned buildings into ghostly silhouettes. Marcus stood perfectly still in the doorway of his chosen shelter, every sense alert, skills honed by 15 years of reading opponents in the arena, of knowing when death approached on silent feet. The toy horse lay innocent at his feet, its painted eyes somehow accused. He had not imagined it. Someone had been here. Someone had entered while he slept, moved the toy, and vanished without waking him, a feat that should have been impossible. In the ludus, the slightest sound would snap him from sleep, ready to defend against rivals who might seek to eliminate competition before it reached the arena. Marcus retrieved the toy carefully, as if it might bite. The wood was smooth, worn by countless small hands. Fresh scratches marked its base, scratches that hadn't been there yesterday. "I know you're watching," he said to the empty air, his voice steady despite the unease crawling beneath his skin. "I mean no harm. This place was sold to me as abandoned. If you have claim to it, speak now." Only silence answered. He waited, counting heartbeats as he'd once counted the seconds between a wounded opponent's breaths. 20, 50, 100, nothing. Finally, Marcus sheathed his gladius and began a methodical search of the ruins. If someone lived here, beggar, fugitive, or madman, he would find them. The alternative explanation that Tergesti truly was haunted, he refused to consider. He had seen enough real horrors without adding imaginary ones. The forum yielded nothing but broken pottery and wild cats that hissed at his approach. The bathhouse had partially collapsed, its pools filled with stagnant rainwater and debris. What might have been a temple stood roofless, its altar cracked down the middle as if split by divine anger. But at the town's eastern edge, Marcus found something that made him stop short: a garden. Not a wild tangle of weeds, but a deliberate planting. Vegetables grew in neat rows: cabbages, turnips, onions, bean vines climbed carefully placed stakes. Someone had watered these recently. The soil was dark with moisture despite the lack of rain. Marcus knelt, examining a footprint in the soft earth. Small, possibly a woman's or a child's. Fresh, no more than a day old. A branch snapped behind him. He spun, hand on sword hilt, to find nothing. But there, at the edge of vision, didn't that shadow move? Didn't those curtains of ivy twitch too deliberately to be wind? I was a slave once, Marcus called out, trying a different approach. 15 years in chains fighting for the amusement of Rome. I've purchased this place with blood money, seeking only peace. I'll share it gladly if you show yourselves. I'll leave entirely if you have stronger claim. But this hiding serves no purpose. A long moment passed, then, so quietly he almost missed it, a voice, young, female, frightened. Go away. Marcus turned slowly toward the sound. It had come from a half-ruined house near the garden, its upper floor gone but its stone walls still solid. I cannot see you. Will you not come out? Go away. The voice was more urgent now, panicked. This place is cursed. The sickness still lingers. You'll die if you stay. The plague burned itself out 20 years ago, Marcus replied calmly, and I've survived worse than sickness. Please, the voice broke, near tears. Just leave, forget this place. She caught herself, but too late. Marcus stepped closer to the house. How many of you are there? Silence. I told you, I mean no harm, but I've traveled far and spent considerable gold for solitude. I cannot simply. An old man emerged from the doorway, moving with painful slowness. His beard was white as fresh snow, his clothes patched but clean. He leaned heavily on a walking stick, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, wary. Forgive my granddaughter, the old man said. She fears strangers. We all do. Marcus kept his hand away from his sword, trying to appear non-threatening. You've lived here since the plague. Before it, during it, after it. The old man's laugh was bitter. We are Tergesti's last citizens, forgotten by Rome, by the gods, by everyone except the tax collectors, who would still claim their due from ghosts. Tax collectors don't come to cursed towns, no, which is why we ensure the curse stories continue. The old man studied Marcus with eyes that had seen too much. You're him, aren't you? The gladiator they call lonely. I saw you fight once, years ago in Rome. You spared a man that day, a Gaul who'd already been wounded. The crowd hated you for it. Marcus remembered. He'd taken lashes for that mercy. That was a lifetime ago. Yet here you are, seeking ghosts instead of glory. The old man seemed to reach a decision. I am Quintus Lucianus. Once, I was Tergesti's magistrate. Now I'm simply an old man trying to keep his family alive and free. A woman appeared in the doorway behind Quintus, perhaps 35 years, with dark hair streaked prematurely with gray. Her face would have been beautiful if not for the hardness around her eyes, the defensive set of her jaw. She kept one hand hidden behind the door frame, undoubtedly gripping a weapon. My daughter, Livia, Quintus said. And Mama? A small face peered around Livia's skirts. A boy no more than 7 or 8, with curious eyes the color of hazelnuts. Marcus's chest tightened. The child was about the age his own son would have been, if he forced the thought away. You've been hiding here for 20 years? What choice did we have? Livia's voice was sharp, protective. When the plague came, my husband was among the first to die. Then my mother, my brothers. By the time it burned out, only a handful remained. The others fled to Rome, but we owed taxes, Quintus said simply. 5 years' worth, with penalties. In Rome we would have been sold to pay the debt. My daughter, my grandson, slaves because I couldn't pay Rome's tribute during a plague. So we stayed. Let them all think Tergesti was cursed, haunted, worthless. And the ones who come to check, Marcus asked, thinking of the merchant's warning. We have our ways, Livia said. Sounds in the night. Shadows where there should be none. Men are easily frightened when they expect ghosts. Like moving toy horses. The boy, he couldn't be Livia's son from her dead husband. The ages were wrong. Ducked further behind his mother. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted to see if you were nice. Grandfather says we can tell about people by how they treat small things. Felix, Livia scolded, but gently. It's all right, Marcus said. Pulling the toy from his belt, he knelt, bringing himself to the boy's eye level, and held it out. "Is this yours?" Felix looked to his mother, who gave a reluctant nod. The boy stepped forward cautiously, took the horse, then retreated quickly to safety. "So," Marcus stood slowly, addressing Quintus, "we have a problem. I've purchased this land legally. You have prior claim but dare not press it in court. What would you have me do?" "What everyone else has done," Livia said. "Leave, forget you ever found us. Let us continue as we have." "For how long?" Marcus asked. "The boy needs more than a ruined town and the company of ghosts. And you," he looked at Quintus, noting the tremor in the old man's hands, the wheeze in his breathing. "You won't live forever. What happens to them when you're gone?" "We survive." Livia's chin lifted. "We've done it for 7 years. 7, Marcus calculated, but the plague was 20 years past. An uncomfortable silence fell. Quintus and Livia exchanged glances. "Perhaps," the old man said carefully, "we should continue this conversation inside. The walls have fewer ears than the wind." They led him to their home, not the ruined structure where they'd hidden, but a more intact building concealed behind it. Inside, Marcus was surprised to find comfort, furniture salvaged and repaired, shelves lined with preserved foods, even books. They had built a life here, small but complete. Livia served water flavored with wild mint, while Felix sat close to his grandfather, still clutching his toy horse and watching Marcus with enormous eyes. "The truth then," Quintus began, "we were not the only survivors initially. Perhaps 30 of us remained after the plague. We tried to rebuild, but without trade, without new blood, it was hopeless. Families drifted away one by one. By the time Felix was born, only we 3 remained, plus 1, Livia added quietly. Marcus waited. "My daughter was not married when she birthed Felix," Quintus said. "The father is a Roman officer. He came through 7 years ago with a century, investigating reports of brigands in these hills. He found our hideaway. He was kind," Livia said, her voice distant. "Lonely. His wife had died in childbirth, along with the baby. He stayed 3 days, promised to return, to bring supplies, to help us. He never came back." "Dead?" Marcus asked. "Transferred to Britannia," Quintus said. "We learned this from a merchant 2 years later. He left not knowing about Felix." The boy had fallen asleep against his grandfather's shoulder, toy horse held loose in one small hand. Looking at him, Marcus felt an ache he'd thought scarred over long ago. "I had a son once," he heard himself say, "and a wife taken by slavers while I was away, fighting for our local magistrate against bandits. I searched for 2 years before I found them. She had died in captivity. The boy, fever took him the winter before I arrived. I killed the man who owned them, and for that, I was made a gladiator." Silence stretched between them, heavy with shared sorrows. "So you understand," Livia said finally, "why we guard what we have so fiercely." "I understand." Marcus looked around the small room, at the life they'd built from ruins. "But winter comes, whether we hide from it or not. Your father grows frail. The boy needs teaching. Other children, a future beyond these stones. And you." "I need nothing," Livia interrupted. "Everyone needs something." Marcus stood. "I propose this. I came here seeking solitude, not to destroy your refuge. The town is large enough for us all. I'll take the western section, near the old barracks. You keep your home here. We need not interact if you prefer it so." "And when you tire of playing hermit," Livia demanded, "when you decide to return to Rome and mention the squatters in your purchased property, then I give you this." Marcus pulled out the deed Lord Cullis had given him. Without hesitation, he tore it in half, handing one piece to a startled Quintus. "Neither complete without the other. Neither of us can claim sole ownership. We are bound now, like it or not." Quintus stared at the torn parchment. "You would trust us so easily. What is trust but a leap in the dark? I've made worse wagers in the arena. This is not some game." Livia stood abruptly, fury flashing in her eyes. "This is our lives, our freedom." "I know what freedom costs," Marcus said quietly. "I've paid for mine in blood. I won't be the one to take yours. Felix stirred at the raised voices, blinking sleepily. Mama, is the sword man staying? I don't know, my heart. Livia smoothed his hair. I don't know. Marcus moved to the door. I'll make camp in the western section. As I said, if you need help with repairs, hunting, protection, you need only ask. If you prefer I stay away, I'll honor that too. But know this, your secret is safe. I've had my fill of Rome and its laws. I came here to disappear. Perhaps we can disappear together. He left before they could respond, walking back through the ruins as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. Behind him he could hear urgent whispered conversation, but couldn't make out the words. Marcus found the old barracks, a long, low building that had once housed the town's small garrison. Part of the roof had collapsed, but one end remained sound. It would do. He had slept in worse places. As he unpacked his few belongings, he thought about the family hidden in the ruins. They had survived through cleverness and determination, creating their own small world within Tergesti's bones. He had intruded on that world, brought uncertainty into their carefully maintained existence. But the boy's eyes haunted him, so young, yet already learning to hide, to fear, to see every stranger as a threat. Is that what freedom meant, trading one cage for another? That night, as Marcus lay on his bedroll listening to the unnatural silence of Tergesti, he heard them again, footsteps on stone, whispers in the wind. But now he knew these ghosts had names. Quintus, Livia, Felix, a grandfather holding his family together by will alone, a mother fierce as any gladiator in defense of her child, a boy who played with wooden horses and judged men by their kindness to small things. He had come here to be alone, to nurse his wounds in solitude. But perhaps, Marcus thought as sleep finally took him, perhaps loneliness was just another kind of wound, and perhaps some wounds needed more than solitude to heal. Tomorrow, he would begin making this section of town livable. He would hunt, gather water, repair walls. He would be the neighbor they clearly didn't want but might eventually need. He would prove through action what words couldn't convey, that not strangers brought danger, that not all soldiers served Rome's hunger, that sometimes broken people could build something new from ruin. It wasn't the solitude he'd sought, but as the first drops of rain began to fall on Tergesti's ancient stones, Marcus realized it might be something better. It might be a beginning. The autumn rains came early to Tergesti, turning the ancient streets into rivers of mud and memory. Marcus had been in the ghost town for 3 weeks now, and in that time, he'd transformed the western barracks into something resembling a home. The roof no longer leaked, thanks to tiles scavenged from collapsed buildings. He'd cleared the old well nearby, surprised to find it still yielded clean water. A hunting bow, purchased from his last stop before reaching Tergesti, kept him fed with rabbits and the occasional deer, but he was not the only one preparing for winter. Each morning, Marcus observed the family's routines from a respectful distance. Quintus would emerge first, checking their garden despite his obvious pain. The old man's joints had stiffened with the cold rain. Livia followed, efficient and tireless, harvesting the last vegetables before frost could claim them. And Felix, the boy, watched everything with those enormous eyes, sometimes helping, sometimes playing with his wooden horse along the edges of their small world. They had not spoken since that first day. The torn deed remained divided between them, a promise and a barrier both. But Marcus noticed things, how Quintus struggled to carry firewood, how Livia's woodpile grew slowly despite her constant efforts, how thin their stores seemed for the coming cold months. He began leaving things where they would find them. A bundle of dry firewood appeared near their door one morning. A freshly killed rabbit hung from their garden post. Another day, when Livia's axe handle broke, he heard the sharp crack and her frustrated curse. A new one materialized overnight, carefully carved from sturdy oak. They never acknowledged these gifts directly, but the items always disappeared. And once Marcus found a small basket of wild mushrooms outside his own door, still damp with morning dew. It was Felix who broke their informal treaty of silence. Marcus was reinforcing his roof when he heard the boy's voice, high and frightened. Grandfather, grandfather, wake up. Without thought, Marcus dropped his tools and ran. He found them in their main room. Quintus collapsed on the floor, his face grey as old parchment. Livia knelt beside him, Felix clutching at her sleeve. "Let me help," Marcus said from the doorway. Livia's eyes flashed to him, torn between suspicion and desperation. "You're not a healer, no, but I've seen men fall like this in the ludus. Sometimes it's the heart forgetting its rhythm." Marcus entered without waiting for permission, kneeling beside Quintus. The old man's pulse fluttered weakly under his fingers. "Felix, fetch cold water. Livia, help me raise his legs." They worked together in tense efficiency. Marcus loosened Quintus's tunic, elevated his legs on a cushion, applied the cold compress Felix brought. Long minutes passed before color began returning to the old man's face. "Grandfather," Felix whispered. Quintus's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to embarrassment. Forgive me. Just a moment of weakness. You've been hiding this," Livia accused, but her voice shook. How long have you been having these spells?" "It doesn't matter." Quintus tried to sit up, but Marcus firmly held him down. "Rest," Marcus commanded, with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "The weakness will pass, but you must not strain yourself." He looked at Livia. "He needs warmth, regular meals, and no heavy labor. The winter will be hard on him." "We know how to survive winter," Livia said defensively, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "Together you might survive it better," Marcus said carefully. "I know you don't trust me, but the boy cannot gather enough wood alone, and you cannot leave your father unattended to hunt. I offer my help freely, with no expectation of everything has a price." Livia interrupted. "Everything? What's your—" Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Felix stroke his grandfather's hand. "In the arena, I learned to kill. It's all I've known for 15 years. Perhaps I could remember how to do something else, how to help instead of harm. That would be price enough." Days passed before Livia appeared at his door. She stood stiffly, pride warring with necessity on her face. "We need meat," she said without preamble. "I can trap small game, but with winter coming, we need more. Grandfather mentioned you hunt." "I do. I can preserve what you catch. Smoking, salting, drying. We'll share the work and the results." "Agreed." She turned to go, then paused. "Felix wants to watch you work on your roof. He's never seen how it's properly done. I would permit it if you're willing." And so their isolation began to crack, slowly, like ice giving way to spring. Felix proved an eager student, following Marcus with endless questions. "Why do the tiles overlap like that? How do you know which beams will hold weight? Did you build things in Rome? What's Rome like? Is it true there are buildings taller than mountains?" Marcus answered patiently, finding an unexpected joy in teaching. The boy's quick mind absorbed everything, and his small hands proved surprisingly clever with tools. "I'm not supposed to like you," Felix confided one afternoon as they worked. "Mama says strangers are dangerous." "Your mother is wise," Marcus replied, showing him how to properly set a tile. "Most strangers can be dangerous, but not you." "I try not to be." Felix considered this. "You were a gladiator. You killed people." "Yes. Did you like it?" Marcus's hands stilled. How to explain to a child the complex horror of the arena? "No," he said finally. "I did it to survive, but survival isn't the same as living." "Is that why you're sad?" "Children," Marcus reflected, "saw too clearly sometimes." "Partly. Mama's sad too," Felix said. "She cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Maybe you could be sad together." Before Marcus could respond, Livia's voice cut across the square. "Felix, time for lessons." The boy scampered off, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of a child's innocent wisdom. As autumn deepened, their separate lives began to interweave through necessity. Marcus hunted, bringing deer and wild boar. Livia worked her preservation magic, transforming fresh meat into stores that would last through winter. Quintus, when his strength allowed, shared his knowledge of the area, which streams ran clear, where medicinal herbs grew, how to read the weather in these hills. One evening, as Marcus delivered a brace of rabbits, he found them in an unexpected scene. Quintus sat propped in his chair while Felix practiced reading from an old scroll. Livia was mending clothes by lamplight, her face soft with concentration. "Stay," Quintus said as Marcus turned to leave. "Felix is reading Homer. Even a gladiator might enjoy the tale of warriors." Marcus hesitated, then settled on a bench near the door. Felix's young voice stumbled over the ancient Greek, but his enthusiasm was infectious. The boy's eyes shone as he described Achilles' rage, Hector's courage, the tragedy of Troy. "Do you think Achilles was wrong?" Felix asked suddenly, looking at Marcus. "To choose glory over a long life. I think," Marcus said slowly, "that Achilles never learned the difference between being remembered and being loved. One feeds pride, the other feeds the soul." Livia looked up from her mending, studying him with those dark, guarded eyes. "Spoken like a man who's had both." "No," Marcus corrected quietly. "Spoken like a man who chose wrong and learned too late." A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the pop of the fire and the whisper of Felix turning pages. It was the first time Marcus had felt peace in he couldn't remember how long, but peace in Tergesti was always fragile. The stranger appeared on a cold morning in early November. Marcus was checking his trap lines when he spotted the figure, a lone rider picking his way carefully through the ruins. Not a merchant's wagon or a traveler's mule, but a horse bred for speed and distance, the kind Roman messengers used. Marcus ghosted back to the family's quarter, finding Livia in the garden. "Someone's coming," official by the look of him. Her face went white. "Felix, get him inside. I'll handle this. You don't understand. If they find us, they'll find a bad-tempered gladiator who bought worthless land and doesn't welcome visitors." Marcus checked his gladius, then thought better of it. Too aggressive. Instead, he picked up a wood axe, a tool not a weapon, but useful as either. "Go. Keep Felix quiet." Livia grabbed his arm as she passed. "Be careful, please." The unexpected concern in her voice warmed him more than any fire. Marcus met the rider in the forum, standing relaxed but ready. The man was young, bearing the insignia of a junior administrator. His nose wrinkled at the desolation around him. "You there?" the rider called imperiously. "Identify yourself." "Marcus Aurelius Calvus, owner of this land." Marcus kept his tone neutral, bored even. "And you?" "Gaius Licinius, assistant to the provincial tax authority." The young man dismounted, pulling out a wax tablet. "We've had reports of activity in Tergesti. The Senate wants to ensure no one is evading their obligation. As you can see," Marcus gestured at the ruins, "there's nothing here but ghosts and a fool who wasted good coin on bad land." Licinius made notations. "You live here alone. Who else would be mad enough?" "We've had reports," Licinius repeated, "of multiple figures seen in the area. Smoke from various buildings." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off stone. "I move between buildings as they suit my needs. Smoke rises from wherever I make camp. Your informant saw shadows and made them into crowds. This place does that, makes you see things that aren't there. Nevertheless, I must inspect." "No." Marcus stepped forward, letting his hand rest casually on the axe handle. "You must not. I purchased this land free and clear. Here's my proof." He produced his half of the torn deed. "As you can see, it's damaged, but legal. I owe no taxes on worthless property the Senate itself declared cursed. So unless you have specific warrant." Licinius backed toward his horse, suddenly aware he was alone with a man who radiated barely contained violence. "The tax authority has right of inspection. In Rome, perhaps, but here." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Here there's just you, me, and a great deal of empty land where a man might disappear. The hills are treacherous. Accidents happen. Are you threatening an imperial officer?" "I'm warning a trespasser. There's a difference." Marcus softened his tone slightly. "Look, boy, you've done your duty. You came, you saw, you found nothing but a bitter ex-gladiator squatting in ruins. Report that. Tell them the stories are true. This place is cursed. cursed with bad water, bad air, and bad tempers, not worth the Senate's time or yours. Licinius scrambled onto his horse. This isn't over. If we receive more reports, you won't. Marcus's certainty seemed to unnerve the young man further. Ghosts don't pay taxes, and neither do I. Good day. He watched until the rider disappeared over the ridge, then maintained his vigilance for another hour. Only when he was certain the man was truly gone did he return to find the family. They were huddled in their inner room, Felix clutched between his mother and grandfather. All three looked up with desperate hope as Marcus entered. He's gone, Marcus said simply. A tax collector's assistant, fishing for violations. He found nothing. Quintus sagged with relief, but Livia remained tense. He'll report the encounter. They might send others, perhaps. But I gave him a story to tell. Crazy gladiator, worthless land, nothing to see. Sometimes the best lies are mostly truth. You risked yourself for us, Quintus said wonderingly. Why? Marcus looked at Felix, who was still clutching his wooden horse with white knuckles. Because some things are worth protecting. That night, for the first time, they invited Marcus to share their evening meal. It was simple fare, rabbit stew with preserved vegetables, but it tasted better than any feast in Rome. They ate in companionable silence, 4 souls sheltering together against the growing cold outside. As Marcus prepared to leave, Felix tugged at his sleeve. Will you teach me to defend us, like you did today, Felix? Livia scolded, but Marcus knelt to the boy's level. The best defense, he said seriously, is to be too valuable to threaten. Learn to heal, to build, to grow things. A man who can help others rarely needs a sword. But you carry one, because I learned too late what I'm teaching you now. Marcus ruffled the boy's hair. But perhaps we can learn better things together, you and I. Walking back to his quarters, through the cold night air, Marcus realized the truth of his own words. He was learning slowly, painfully, but learning nonetheless. How to teach instead of fight. How to protect instead of destroy. How to be part of something instead of apart from it. Winter was coming to Tergesti, bringing its own challenges and dangers. But for the first time in 15 years, Marcus wouldn't face it alone, and neither would they. Winter arrived with vengeance, as if the gods themselves sought to test the fragile peace-building in Tergesti. The first snow fell gently, almost beautiful, dusting the ruins like a blessing. But by the third day, it had become a siege wind howling through broken walls, snow piling higher than doorways, temperatures plummeting until even breathing hurt. Marcus had weathered many winters, but always with the warmth of the lotus, the guarantee of food, the knowledge that his owners wouldn't let valuable property freeze. This was different. This was nature stripped of mercy, demanding respect or death. He was checking his food stores when he heard it, a crash, followed by Felix's terrified scream. Marcus plunged through the snow, fighting drifts that reached his thighs. He found chaos. Their roof had partially collapsed under the weight of snow, opening their main room to the brutal sky. Quintus lay pinned beneath a beam, unconscious and bleeding. Livia struggled frantically to lift the wood while Felix stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. "Move," Marcus commanded, his arena voice cutting through their panic. He assessed the situation in a heartbeat. The beam was too heavy for Livia alone, but moving it wrong could bring down more of the roof. "Livia, support your father's head. Felix, get blankets. Now." They obeyed instinctively. Marcus positioned himself under the beam, muscles screaming as he lifted. Years of training, of building strength to survive, served him now for better purpose. The beam rose inch by agonizing inch. "Pull him out." Livia dragged her father clear just as Marcus's strength gave. The beam crashed down, taking more ceiling with it. Snow poured through the gap like water through a broken dam. "We need shelter," Livia said, cradling her father's bleeding head. "He won't survive the cold." "My quarters," Marcus decided. "Felix, gather what food and blankets you can carry. Livia, I'll take your father. We move now, before the storm worsens. But our things can be replaced. Lives cannot. Move." The journey across the town square became an epic battle. Marcus carried Quintus. The old man's weight, nothing compared to the wind trying to tear them apart. Livia struggled behind with Felix, both laden with hastily grabbed supplies. The boy fell twice, crying out as snow filled his clothes, but each time scrambled up with desperate determination. Marcus's quarters had never seemed so far away, but his roof held strong. He'd built it to last, never knowing it would shelter more than his own solitude. They collapsed inside, gasping. Marcus immediately tended to Quintus, using skills learned from watching the Ludus physicians. The head wound was messy but not deep. More concerning was the old man's shallow breathing, the blue tinge to his lips. "Build up the fire," he ordered Livia. "Felix, help me pile every blanket we have around your grandfather." They worked with desperate efficiency. Slowly warmth began to fill the space. Color returned to Quintus's face, though he remained unconscious. "The roof," Livia said dully. "Everything we had is buried until spring," Marcus finished. "But you're alive. That's what matters." She laughed bitterly. "Alive for how long? Our food stores, our preserved meat. I have supplies, not abundant, but enough if we're careful." Marcus studied their small group. An injured old man, an exhausted woman, a frightened child. His solitude had officially ended. "We'll manage." "Why?" Livia's voice cracked. "Why do you keep helping us? What do you want?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Felix curl against his grandfather's side. "For 15 years I survived by being strong, by being alone, by telling myself that caring for others was weakness." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. Strength without purpose is just violence. Solitude without choice is just another cage." "Pretty words," Livia said, "but without heat. They won't feed us through winter." "No, but my bow might. My trap certainly. And together we're more likely to survive than apart." Quintus stirred, groaning. His eyes opened, unfocused. "Livia, I'm here, father." She gripped his hand. "We're safe. Marcus brought us to his quarters." The old man's gaze found Marcus. "The roof. I'm sorry. I should have reinforced it better." "Buildings can be rebuilt," Marcus said. "Rest now. Heal. We have time to plan once this war passes." But the storm didn't pass. For 5 days the blizzard raged as if trying to erase Tergesti entirely. They huddled together in Marcus's single room, rationing food, melting snow for water, keeping the fire constantly fed. It was Felix who surprised them all with his resilience. The boy appointed himself guardian of the fire, waking at all hours to add wood. He told stories to his grandfather, made up silly songs to lift spirits, and never once complained about hunger or cold. "He's stronger than he looks," Livia murmured one night, watching her son tend the flames. "Children often are," Marcus replied. "They haven't learned to expect defeat." His father was strong too. The words slipped out, surprising them both. Livia flushed. "I shouldn't speak of him." "Why not?" "He's part of Felix's story." She was quiet so long Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Then, his name was Lucius Aurelius Cotta. He was kind, gentle for a soldier. He spoke of books and philosophy, unusual for a military man. "For 3 days I forgot to be afraid." Her voice turned bitter. "Then he left, and I remembered why we hide." "He gave you Felix?" "Yes." Her hand moved unconsciously to smooth her son's sleeping hair. "My greatest joy and deepest fear. What future can he have here? What life beyond hiding and scraping for survival?" "Perhaps," Marcus said carefully, "that's not for us to decide. Perhaps we simply keep him alive and let him choose his own path." Spoken like someone who had choices. "I was a slave, Livia. Every choice was made for me, until I bought my freedom with blood." He paused. "But you're right. Even as a slave, I had options. Felix doesn't. I could have died in the arena any day, but at least I would have died seen, remembered." "You've had to live as ghosts. Better ghosts than slaves." "True, but what about something better than either?" On the 6th day the storm finally exhausted itself. They emerged to a transformed world, Tergesti buried beneath pristine white, beautiful and deadly. Drifts reached the lower windows. Entire buildings had vanished beneath the snow. Their first priority was Quintus, who had developed a fever. Marcus knew enough battlefield medicine to recognize danger. They needed willow bark for the fever, proper bandages for his wounds, and more food than their dwindling stores could provide. "I'll go to the valley," Marcus decided. "There's a settlement's about a day's journey. I can trade for supplies. In this snow," Livia protested, "it's suicide. I've survived worse." He was already gathering what tradable goods he had. A spare knife, some worked leather, the last of his coins. "Keep the fire going. Melt snow for your father to drink. I'll be back within 3 days. And if you're not..." Marcus looked at her steadily. "Then you'll survive, as you did before I came. But I will be back." Felix threw his arms around Marcus's waist. "Promise?" "I promise, little warrior." Marcus knelt to the boy's level. "Take care of your mother and grandfather. You're the man of the house while I'm gone." The journey was brutal. Snow had obliterated the paths, turning familiar landmarks into alien shapes. More than once Marcus had to dig himself free from drifts that swallowed him whole. His gladiator's conditioning served him well, but by nightfall, even he was exhausted. He sheltered in a shepherd's abandoned hut, building a small fire and gnawing on dried meat. Alone again, he was surprised to find the solitude uncomfortable. When had the sound of Felix's laughter become necessary? When had Livia's sharp wit become something he looked forward to? When had Quintus's wisdom become a comfort? "When you stopped being the lonely gladiator," a voice whispered in his mind, and started being Marcus again. The second day brought new challenges. The path descended into the valley, treacherous with ice beneath the snow. Marcus picked his way carefully, using his staff to test each step. He was so focused on the ground that he almost missed the danger above. The growl was his only warning. Marcus looked up to see a wolf on the ridge above him, yellow eyes fixed on prey. Winter had made it bold, desperate. Others would be near. Wolves rarely hunted alone. He drew his gladius slowly, no sudden movements. The wolf tensed, lips pulling back from yellowed fangs. 2 more shapes appeared beside it, 3 against 1, with the high ground advantage. In the arena, Marcus would have charged, used aggression to unsettle opponents. But this wasn't the arena. He had promises to keep. Instead, he backed away carefully, keeping his sword pointed up, making himself look larger. The wolves followed, patient, waiting for weakness. The dance continued for an eternity. Marcus retreating, the pack advancing, death hovering between them like morning mist. Then his foot found ice beneath the snow. Marcus fell hard, sliding down the slope in an avalanche of white. The wolves leaped to pursue, but the same ice that betrayed him now saved him. They skidded, fought for purchase, buying him precious seconds. He hit a tree hard enough to rattle his teeth, but rolled with the impact, came up running. Behind him, the wolves howled frustration, but didn't follow into the deeper valley. They had easier prey in the heights. Marcus ran until his lungs burned, until he was sure they'd abandoned the chase. Only then did he assess damage: bruised ribs, a gash on his left arm, but nothing serious, nothing that would stop him keeping his promise. The settlement, when he finally reached it, was little more than a cluster of farms around a small market, but it had what he needed. The traders were suspicious of this scarred stranger emerging from the storm, but coins spoke a universal language. Marcus traded carefully: medicine for Quintus, preserved foods, grain, even a small bag of salt worth its weight in silver. His last coins went for something impractical: a small pot of honey and a carved wooden soldier that reminded him of Felix's horse. "Storm catch you in the hills?" the merchant asked, eyeing Marcus's torn clothing and obvious exhaustion. "Something like that. Lucky you made it. These mountains eat travelers in winter." "Course, only fools and fugitives travel these paths in weather like this." The merchant's look sharpened. "Which are you? The kind who pays in coin and doesn't cause trouble?" Marcus replied evenly. "Fair enough. Word of advice, there's talk of soldiers coming through after the thaw, looking for tax evaders, they say. Might want to be elsewhere when they arrive. Marcus filed this information away. My thanks. The journey back was harder, burdened with supplies and fighting exhaustion, but the thought of Felix watching for his return, of Livia trying to hide her worry, of Quintus needing medicine, drove him onward. He reached Tergesti as the sun set on the third day, exactly as promised. Felix saw him first. The boy's shout of joy echoed off the ruins as he plowed through snow, launching himself at Marcus with complete trust that he'd be caught. You came back. You came back. I promised, didn't I? Marcus lifted the boy, surprised at how right the weight felt in his arms. Livia appeared in the doorway, and the relief on her face was worth every step of the journey. You fool, she said, but her voice was warm. We thought, when the storm worsened, I'm harder to kill than weather. He set Felix down, began unpacking supplies. How's your father? The fever broke yesterday, but he's weak. She stared at the medicine, the food, the unexpected treasures. This must have cost everything you had. Coins are just metal. This, he gestured at their small gathering, this is wealth. That night, they feasted by the standards of their situation. Quintus, propped up and sipping medicinal tea, told stories of Tergesti in its glory days. Felix played with his new wooden soldier, making it battle heroically with his horse. Livia prepared the meal with touches of honey that made simple food taste like ambrosia. I've been thinking, Quintus said as they settled for the night. When spring comes, we should rebuild together. One household instead of two. Pool our resources, our strength. Father, Livia warned, but he waved her off. I'm old, daughter, not blind. Marcus has proven himself 10 times over, and Felix needs more than 2 ghosts for family. He looked at Marcus. What say you? Would you share a home with us? Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Ice he hadn't known was there, beginning to thaw. I came here seeking solitude, he said slowly, but perhaps what I was really seeking was a reason to end it. Is that a yes? Felix asked hopefully. That's a yes, little warrior. The boy whooped. Quintus smiled, and even Livia's careful walls showed cracks. Outside, winter still raged, promising more trials before spring. The threat of discovery hung over them like a sword. But inside their small shelter, warmed by fire and something more, Marcus understood a truth the arena had never taught. Sometimes the greatest strength was admitting you needed others. Sometimes the bravest thing was choosing not to be alone. And sometimes family wasn't about blood. It was about showing up in storms, keeping promises, and deciding that together was better than apart, no matter what tomorrow might bring. Spring came late to Tergesti, fighting winter for every inch of ground. But when it finally arrived, it transformed the ghost town into something almost magical. Wildflowers pushed through cracks in ancient stones, turning ruins into gardens. The stream swelled with snowmelt, singing a song of renewal that hadn't been heard for 20 years. Marcus stood in what had been the forum, planning. The winter had changed everything. They were no longer 4 individuals hiding in the ruins. They were a family, forged by shared hardship and mutual care. Now it was time to build something lasting. Here, he said, pointing to a structure near the town's heart. This building has the best bones. Stone walls still solid, partial roof, we can repair. Big enough for all of us, small enough to heat efficiently. Quintus leaned on his walking stick, studying the ruins with an architect's eye. The winter had aged him, but surviving it had also given him new purpose. It was the magistrate's house once, mine actually, in better days, fitting that it should shelter us now. The irony isn't lost on me, Livia said dryly, but she was smiling. The spring sun had brought color back to her cheeks, and lately her smiles came easier, from hidden fugitives to reclaiming our own home. Can I help build? Felix bounced on his toes, energy barely contained. The boy had grown over the winter, shooting up like the spring flowers. Marcus, you promised to teach me, and I will. But first, we plan. Building without thinking is like fighting without strategy. A good way to lose. They spent days mapping out their new home. Marcus's practical knowledge merged with Quintus's memories of the building's original layout and Livia's insights about daily needs. Felix contributed enthusiasm and surprisingly clever observations about which rooms got the best light. The work began in earnest. Marcus taught Felix to evaluate stones, select timber, mix mortar. The boy absorbed every lesson with intense focus, his small hands gradually becoming skilled. "You're a natural builder," Marcus told him one afternoon as they fitted stones together. "Maybe I'll build all of Tergesti back someday," Felix said dreamily. "Make it beautiful again so people will come back." "Maybe you will," Marcus agreed, but caught Livia's worried glance. The dream of rebuilding was beautiful, but it meant exposure, discovery. The price of their safety was Tergesti's continued death. As they worked, they developed rhythms. Mornings for heavy labor, while the air was cool. Afternoons for lighter tasks. Livia gathering herbs and expanding their garden, Quintus teaching Felix his letters and numbers, Marcus hunting or maintaining their tools. Evenings together, sharing meals and stories as their new home slowly took shape around them. It was during one such evening that Livia surprised them all. "I've been thinking," she began, which usually preceded something significant. "We can't hide forever. Felix needs more than we can give him here. Education, other children, a chance at a real life." Livia, Quintus warned. "We've discussed this. The moment we reveal ourselves, I know, slavery or worse. But what if—" She took a breath. "What if we didn't reveal ourselves? What if we created new identities? A veteran gladiator and his family, settling in abandoned land." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You would claim to be my wife?" Color rose in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "It would explain everything. Why we're here, why Felix resembles neither of us completely. Veterans often settle in remote areas, and with your reputation, few would question too closely." "It's dangerous," Quintus said, but thoughtfully. "One slip, one person who knew us before." "The plague was 20 years ago," Livia countered. "I was a child then, unrecognizable now. You've aged beyond easy recognition." Felix was born after. "Only our names would betray us." "New names, then," Marcus said quietly. "New lives built on careful truth. I am a freed gladiator. True, you are my family. True in all ways that matter. We sought empty land to start fresh. Also true." "You would do this?" Quintus asked. "Bind yourself to our deception." Marcus looked at each of them. Quintus, who had become the father he'd never known. Livia, who challenged and inspired him daily. Felix, who had given him purpose beyond survival. "I bound myself to you the day I tore that deed," he said. "This simply makes it official." Felix had been listening with growing excitement. "Does this mean Marcus is my father now?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Livia's breath caught. Marcus felt the weight of it, not just the deception, but what it meant. To be a father again. To risk that pain. "If you'll have me," he said roughly. Felix's answer was to throw himself at Marcus, small arms wrapping tight around his neck. "I've been practicing calling you Papa in my head," the boy whispered. For weeks, Marcus held him close, feeling something broken inside finally begin to heal. Over Felix's shoulder, he saw Livia watching with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, worry, and something else, something warmer. Their new life required new names. After much debate, they became the Calvus family. Marcus kept his earned cognomen, while Quintus became simply grandfather. Livia took the name Julia, and Felix remained himself. Simple names, common enough to avoid notice. "We'll need documentation eventually," Quintus pointed out. "If we're to truly rejoin the world." "I know someone," Marcus said reluctantly. "In Rome, a forger who serves the gladiator schools, creating papers for freed slaves. He owes me a debt." "You would return to Rome?" Livia Julia now asked sharply. That's dangerous for you too. You made enemies in your victories, less dangerous than living forever as ghosts. Felix deserves better. Spring flowed into early summer, and their house grew daily. It would never match its original grandeur, but it was becoming something better, a home built by their own hands, shaped to their needs. Felix's corner, with his precious books and toys, Julia's herb-drying room that caught the morning sun, Quintus's seat by the window, where he could watch the town square and remember better days. Marcus's workspace, where he crafted furniture and taught Felix woodworking. They were plastering the last wall when Marcus heard it, the distant sound of horses. Multiple riders, moving fast. Inside he ordered tersely, "Now." They had drilled for this. Julia grabbed Felix. Quintus gathered their most precious possessions, and they retreated to the hidden cellar Marcus had discovered and reinforced. It was cramped and dark, but undetectable from above. Marcus waited in the open, dirty from construction, looking every inch the solitary settler. The riders thundered into the square, not tax collectors this time, but soldiers. A full contubernium, 8 men, armed and armored. Their leader, a weathered opsher with intelligent eyes, dismounted carefully. "You there. Identify yourself, Marcus Calvus. I own this land." He kept his tone neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. "Can I help you? We're searching for fugitives, bandits who've been raiding merchant caravans in these hills. They might seek shelter in abandoned places." "I've seen no one," Marcus said truthfully. "This place has been empty since I arrived last autumn." The opsho studied him, taking in the scars, the bearing, the calloused hands. "Your military was Gladiator. Earned my freedom and wanted somewhere quiet." "A gladiator?" One of the younger soldiers perked up. "What was your inner name?" "The Lonely Gladiator." The effect was immediate. The young soldier's eyes widened. "By Mars, I saw you fight 2 years ago. You defeated 3 men at once in the Floods games." Marcus neither confirmed nor denied, just waited. The opsher's assessment sharpened. "That was impressive work," the officer said finally. "A man like you settling here alone seems a waste of talent. I've had my fill of killing for crowds." "Understandable. Still, the frontier always needs good men. The pay's regular, and veterans get land grants after service." The opsher paused. "Better than hiding in ruins." "I'm not hiding," Marcus said evenly. "I'm building. There's a difference." "Is there?" "A man alone in a ghost town, no matter how skilled, is vulnerable. These bandits, for instance. What would stop them from slitting your throat while you sleep?" Marcus let a cold smile touch his lips. "Experience. I sleep very lightly." The opsher laughed. "I believe you do." He gestured to his men. "Search the area. Look for signs of recent camps, multiple fires, anything suspicious." Marcus forced himself to remain calm as soldiers spread through Tergesti. They were thorough, but not destructive, professional rather than vindictive. One approached the new house. "You're rebuilding?" the soldier asked. "Man needs shelter. This had the best foundation. Big for one person. I plan ahead." The soldier lost interest, moving on. After an hour that felt like a day, they regrouped in the square. "Nothing, sir," one reported, "just the one dwelling being repaired. One set of tracks, one fire pit." "He's alone." The opsher mounted his horse. "My apologies for the intrusion, Calvus. A word of advice. If you see strangers, be careful. These bandits are desperate men. They've killed before. I'll keep that in mind, and if you change your mind about that frontier posting, ask for opsher Lucius Antonius at the garrison in Tusculum. We could use a man who defeated 3 at once." They rode off in a cloud of dust and possibility. Marcus waited a full hour before releasing the others from hiding. Felix burst out first, gasping for fresh air. "That was terrifying. I thought they'd find us for certain." "But they didn't," Marcus said, lifting the boy free. "And now we know our story holds. They saw what we wanted them to see. A lone veteran starting over. That officer, Julia said thoughtfully. He was offering you something, a return to violence. I'm not interested. No, something else. Legitimacy. Connection. If you were known to the garrison, had friends there, it would make our story stronger, Quintus finished. A gladiator who corresponds with the local garrison is less suspicious than a complete hermit. Marcus saw the wisdom, but felt the trap. Connections meant questions, visits, entanglements, but perhaps that was the price of the life they were building. I'll think on it, he said. That night, as they celebrated their successful deception with a special meal, Felix asked, "Were you scared, Papa?" The title still sent warmth through Marcus's chest. Yes, he admitted, but not of the soldiers. Then what? Marcus looked around their small circle, his family. He could finally think the word without pain. I was afraid of losing this, of them taking you away. That won't happen, Felix said with a child's certainty. We're too smart, and you're too strong, and Mama's too clever, and Grandfather's too wise. Together, we're invincible, from your mouth to the god's ears, Quintus murmured. Later, after Felix and Quintus had retired, Marcus and Julia sat by the dying fire. These quiet moments had become precious, a chance to drop their various masks and just be. You did well today, Julia said. I almost believed you really were just a lone settler. Parts of it were true. The best lies always are. And which parts were lies? Marcus considered. The part about being alone. I haven't been alone since the day I arrived here. Julia smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. No, you haven't. She hesitated, then added, Felix loves you, you know. Not just as a protector or teacher. As a father, I know. It terrifies me. Why? Because I failed once before. My son. My blood son. I wasn't there when he needed me. What if I fail Felix too? Julia's hand found his warm and cordialist from work. You won't. You can't know that. I can, because your first son was taken despite your love. Felix is here because of it. Every day you choose to stay, to build, to teach him. That's not failing. That's the opposite. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching embers fade to ash. Finally, Julia stood. Good night, Marcus. Good night, wife. She paused at the door, looking back. That's the first time you've said it when we're alone. I'm practicing, like Felix. Her laugh was soft as spring rain. Keep practicing. As summer approached, their new life solidified. The house stood complete, modest, but sound. The garden flourished under Julia's care. Felix grew browner and stronger, racing through the ruins with the confidence of a boy who knew he was loved and protected. And Marcus found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. The nightmares of the arena faded, replaced by dreams of building, teaching, protecting. His hands, which had once dealt only death, now created furniture, tools, toys. His voice, which had roared battle cries, now told bedtime stories. He was becoming what he'd never thought possible, not just a free man, but a whole one. One evening, as they sat outside watching stars appear, Felix asked, "Will we always live here, just us?" "Perhaps not always," Quintus said carefully. "Someday, when you're older, you might want to see more of the world, but we'll always be together, right? Our family." Marcus and Julia exchanged glances over his head. So much uncertainty lay ahead. The threat of discovery, the challenge of Felix's education, the question of what they were becoming to each other, beyond their necessary pretense. But in that moment, with summer insects beginning their songs and the ghost town peaceful around them, only one answer was possible. "Yes," Marcus said firmly, "always together." And for the first time since a magistrate's son, a gladiator, a widow and an orphan had found each other in the ruins, it felt less like a promise and more like simple truth. 5 years passed like water through cupped hands, precious, transformative, impossible to hold. Turgesty bloomed under their care, sections of the ghost town returning to life like a patient recovering from long illness. They had built not just a home but a small paradise, terraced gardens, heavy with vegetables, fruit trees they'd coaxed back to productivity, a workshop where Marcus crafted furniture that would have sold well in any Roman market. Felix, now 12, had grown tall and strong, with his mother's quick wit and Marcus's steady patience. He could read Latin and Greek, calculate figures that made Marcus's head spin, and track game through the hills like a born hunter. But more than any skill, he radiated the confidence of a child who had never doubted he was loved. It was a morning in late spring when everything changed. Marcus was teaching Felix advanced swordwork, not for violence, but for discipline and exercise, when they heard the horses. Many horses, moving with military precision. Positions, Marcus said quietly, and Felix immediately sheathed his practice sword, ready to run for the hidden cellar. But something was different this time. The riders weren't searching cautiously. They were coming directly to Tergesti, with purpose. "Julia," Marcus called. "Quintus, we have." He stopped. At the head of the column rode Optio Lucius Antonius, whom Marcus had corresponded with occasionally over the years. But beside him, in the purple-striped toga of a senior magistrate, rode someone else. Someone whose face made Marcus's blood freeze. Gaius Lucullus, the merchant who had sold him Tergesti. "Felix, go to your mother. Now." Marcus's voice brooked no argument. The boy ran. Marcus walked out to meet them, mind racing. Why was Lucullus here? What did he want? The fat merchant had grown fatter, carried now in a cushioned chair between 4 slaves, but his pig eyes were sharp as ever. "Ah, Marcus Aurelius Calvus," Lucullus called out cheerfully, "my greatest customer, how wonderful to see you thriving." "Lucullus," Marcus kept his voice neutral, "an unexpected pleasure. Indeed, when my friend Optio Antonius mentioned corresponding with the famous Gladiator in Tergesti, I simply had to see for myself. Imagine my delight to learn you'd transformed my worthless property into something livable." The threat was subtle but clear. Lucullus knew something, wanted something. "You've come a long way for curiosity," Marcus said. "Oh, more than curiosity, my friend. You see, I've recently been appointed to the provincial tax authority. Fascinating work reviewing old records, uncovering forgotten obligations." His smile was predatory. "Tergesti, for instance. Did you know the original tax debt was never formally forgiven, merely overlooked? 25 years of accumulated interest makes for quite a sum." Marcus felt the trap closing. "The Senate declared the town cursed, abandoned." But you've proved it quite habitable, which means those old debts can be collected after all. Unless," Lucullus paused dramatically, "we come to some arrangement. Think plainly. I need a man of your skills. There are certain individuals who owe me significant sums, difficult to collect through normal channels, but a gladiator's reputation, a warrior's presence, that opens doors, work for me, and Tergesti's tax debt remains forgotten. And if I refuse?" Lucullus's smile widened. "Then I'll be forced to inventory every soul living here for the tax rolls. Starting with that beautiful woman I glimpsed in the doorway. Your wife, I assume. And was that a child who ran at your command? How wonderful that you've started a family, though I do hope all their documentation is in order. The penalties for harboring fugitives are quite severe." Marcus's hand moved toward his sword, but Antonius stepped forward. "Easy, Calvus. No one wants violence here, don't they?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "A parasite comes to my home, threatens my family and expects cooperation. I expect intelligence," Lucullus said, unperturbed. "You were smart enough to win 100 battles. Be smart enough to win this one without fighting." A sound made them all turn. Julia had emerged from the house, moving with quiet dignity. She'd changed into her best stola, hair arranged formally, every inch the Roman matron. Felix stood beside her, and behind them, leaning heavily on his stick, came Quintus. "Husband," Julia said calmly, "won't you introduce us to your guests?" Marcus's heart clenched, but he played along. "Julia, This is Gaius Lucullus, the merchant who sold me our land, and Optio Antonius, whom you know from my letters. Julia inclined her head gracefully. Gentlemen, welcome to our home. Felix, bring water for our guests. No need, Lucullus said, studying her with calculating eyes. Julia, was it? A lovely name, common in Rome. Tell me, my dear, where did you grow up? Wherever my husband's career took us. Julia replied smoothly. A gladiator's woman learns not to grow attached to places. Indeed, and you, old father? Lucullus turned to Quintus. You look familiar. Have we met? All old men look alike, to the young, Quintus said mildly. Though I believe I once saw you in the Forum, selling watered wine as Falernian. Lucullus's face darkened. You're mistaken. Am I? Age clouds many memories. The tension stretched taut. Then Felix, with a child's innocent timing, asked, Papa, why is that fat man threatening us? Felix, Julia scolded, but Marcus saw Antonius hide a smile. An excellent question, Marcus said. Lucullus, you've made your proposition. Now leave. I'll send my answer within 3 days. Oh, I think not. Lucullus gestured, and his guards moved to flanking positions. You see, I've done some research since ending of your residence here. Fascinating records in the provincial archives. A magistrate named Quintus Lucanius, who disappeared during the plague, along with his daughter Livia, significant tax debts. And look, here's an old man and a woman of the right age, hiding in the very town they fled. Coincidence, Marcus said, but he could see they were trapped. Perhaps. Shall we test it? Guards arrest the woman and the old man on suspicion of tax evasion. We'll let the courts determine their identity. Everything happened at once. Marcus's gladius rang from its sheath. Julia pulled Felix behind her, producing a long knife from her stola. Even Quintus raised his walking stick defensively. Stop, Antonius commanded. Lucullus, this goes too far. You have no proof, no warrant. I have authority to investigate tax crimes. Lucullus snapped. Stand aside, Optio, or share their fate. Papa, Felix's voice was small, frightened. And in that moment Marcus made a choice. Not the gladiator's choice to fight and die gloriously, but a father's choice to protect at any cost. Wait, he lowered his sword. If I agree, if I become your collector, you'll leave them alone? Marcus, no. Julia stepped forward, but he held up a hand. Your word, Lucullus, sworn before witnesses. I work for you, and my family remains free and unmolested. Lucullus's grin was triumphant. You have it. Your service for their safety, and Tergesti's tax debt, forgotten, as long as you remain cooperative. Marcus sheathed his sword. Then I agree. Marcus. Julia's voice broke. You can't. I can. He turned to her, letting her see everything in his eyes. I will. Excellent. Lucullus clapped pudgy hands. You'll return with us immediately. Your first assignment. No. The word cracked like a whip. Lucullus blinked. No. I need 3 days to arrange matters here. To say, Marcus's voice caught, to say goodbye properly, touching, but unnecessary. They'll be here when you return between assignments. 3 days, Marcus repeated, steel in his voice, or find another collector. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Lucullus waved dismissively. Fine, 3 days. But if you run, I won't run. Marcus looked at his family, memorizing every detail. I have too much to lose. The column departed in dust and threats, leaving silence behind. Marcus stood frozen, aware that everything had shattered, but not yet feeling the cuts. Papa, Felix ran to him, clutching his waist. You're not really leaving, are you? This is a trick, right? Like when we fool the tax collectors. Marcus knelt, gathering the boy close. Sometimes, Felix, we have to do things we don't want to protect the people we love. But we're supposed to be together, always. You promised, and we will be. This isn't forever. You're lying. Felix pulled away, tears streaming. You're leaving us just like my real father did. The words hit like a blade between ribs. Felix ran into the house, Julia following after a long look at Marcus that said everything and nothing. Only Quintus remained, leaning heavily on his stick. It was the only choice, the old man said quietly. Was it? You know it was. In the arena you could have fought, probably even won, but Felix would have watched his father kill again. Julia would be arrested. I would die in custody within days. You chose their lives over your freedom. Quintus touched his shoulder. That's not the choice of a gladiator. That's the choice of a father. That evening, their last meal together was quiet. Felix wouldn't look at Marcus, picking at his food. Julia moved mechanically, all warmth drained away. Only Quintus tried to maintain normalcy, but even his stories fell flat. Finally, Marcus couldn't bear it. Felix, would you walk with me? The boy shrugged, but followed. They climbed to the hill overlooking Tergesti, their special place where Marcus had taught him to read the stars. I'm sorry, Felix said suddenly. What I said about my real father. You're my real father, the only one that matters, Felix. But why do fathers always leave? The boy's voice broke entirely. What's wrong with me that makes them go away? Marcus pulled him close, his own eyes burning. Nothing is wrong with you. You're perfect, exactly as you are. Sometimes the world forces impossible choices, but leaving doesn't mean not loving. I will love you every moment I'm gone, and that love will bring me back. Promise? I promise. And have I ever broken a promise to you? No. Felix wiped his eyes. Will you teach me something? Something to remember while you're gone? Marcus thought. There's a meditation I learned in the Ludus, for the night before a fight, when fear tries to steal your strength. He positioned Felix facing the sunset. Close your eyes, breathe deep. Feel the earth beneath you, solid and eternal. You are rooted like the mountains. Storms may come, but mountains endure. They practiced together until stars appeared. Felix's breathing steadied, his small body finding stillness. Better? Yes. Felix opened his eyes. Papa, kill them. What? The men making you leave. You're the greatest gladiator ever. Kill them and come home. Felix, that's not. I know you don't want to, but sometimes we have to do things we don't want to protect people we love. You taught me that. The boy's words followed Marcus back to the house, where Julia waited in their room. They looked at each other across the gulf of coming separation. I hate you, she said quietly. I know. I hate that you're right. I hate that this is the only way. I hate that you made me love you just to lose you. Julia, she crossed to him in 2 strides, kissing him fiercely. Come back, she whispered against his lips. I don't care how. Come back to us. They made love like it was the first time and the last time, desperate and tender and full of unspoken promises. Afterward, they lay entwined, neither willing to waste their remaining hours on sleep. I never told you, Julia murmured, about the day you arrived. I was terrified. We'd worked so hard to remain hidden, and here came this dangerous man seeking solitude. I wanted to poison your water, make you sick enough to leave. Why didn't you? Felix. He snuck out that first night, wanted to see the sword man up close. He watched you sitting by your fire, saw you find his toy horse. You could have thrown it aside, broken it, ignored it. Instead, you placed it carefully on the ledge. That's when I knew we were safe. A gladiator undone by a wooden horse. A good man revealed by gentleness. She traced the scars on his chest. Promise me something. Whatever Lucullus makes you do, don't let it turn you back into what you were. Don't let Felix's father become a monster. I promise. Morning came too soon. Marcus packed light weapons. Basic supplies, the wooden horse Felix had pressed into his hands. So you remember us, the boy had said solemnly. At the town's edge, they gathered for farewell. Quintus clasped his hand. Take care of yourself, my son. We need you whole. Julia stood rigid, holding Felix's hand. The boy was trying so hard to be brave, chin quivering with the effort. 3 months, Marcus said. I'll find a way to visit in 3 months. We'll be here, Julia managed. Always here. Marcus kissed her forehead, then knelt to embrace Felix one last time. Remember the meditation. Mountains endure. Mountains endure, Felix repeated. Marcus walked away without looking back. If he had, his resolve would have crumbled. Behind him, he heard Felix's voice. high and clear in the morning air. That's my papa, the bravest man in the empire. He'll come back. He always comes back. The road stretched ahead, leading to servitude and violence and everything he'd tried to leave behind. But Felix was wrong about one thing. Marcus wasn't brave. A brave man wouldn't have tears streaming down his face, wouldn't feel his heart tearing with each step. A brave man wouldn't be planning the 1,000 ways he could free himself and return, no matter the cost. But a father would endure anything, become anything, sacrifice anything for his family. And Marcus Aurelius Calvus, the lonely gladiator no more, was finally, truly, completely a father. The wooden horse in his pack seemed to pulse with warmth, a talisman against the dark days ahead. Somewhere behind him, a boy practiced mountain meditation. A woman tended gardens with fierce determination. An old man began planning for contingencies. They would endure, all of them. Mountains always